The first thing I noticed was the candles. Not one or two, but 6 of them, flickering softly across the small wooden table like fragile promises trying not to go out. The second thing I noticed was that there were only 2 plates. She stood by the stove, her back to me, shoulders trembling just slightly as if she was holding something in. When she finally turned around, she smiled and said it was just dinner for 2. Just you and me. And something inside my chest tightened in a way I hadn't felt in years. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, in love that arrives quietly when you least expect it, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this deserve to be heard. Her name was Rachel. We had been roommates for 8 months in a quiet neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. 2 strangers who met through an online listing and ended up sharing a space neither of us really felt belonged to us. I had moved there after a divorce that left me feeling like a shadow of the man I used to be. My ex-wife had taken our daughter across the country, and the house I once filled with laughter became unbearably silent. I left everything behind and accepted a job transfer, convincing myself that distance would heal what heartbreak had shattered. Rachel carried her own silence. She was a nurse at a local hospital, working double shifts more often than not. She rarely talked about her past, but sometimes I would catch her staring at old photographs on her phone, her expression distant and heavy. We existed in polite routines. Good morning. Long day. Dinners in the fridge. We never crossed into each other's deeper worlds. Or at least, I thought we didn't. That evening had started like any other. I came home exhausted, tie loosened, shoulders aching from another day of pretending I was fine. But the apartment smelled different. Warm. Inviting. Garlic and rosemary drifted through the air like an embrace. Soft music played in the background. And there she was, wearing a simple blue dress instead of her usual scrubs, her hair down, eyes glowing with something I couldn't name. She said she had the night off and thought we both deserved a proper meal. Just you and me. I laughed nervously and asked if this was a date. The words slipped out before I could stop them, half joking, half hoping, and completely terrified of the answer. Rachel didn't laugh. She looked at me in a way that made time feel slower. There was vulnerability in her gaze, but also courage. She told me she had watched me for months, seen the way I carried loneliness like a second skin. She had heard me pacing at night, had noticed the untouched leftovers in the fridge, the unopened mail from my daughter that I was too afraid to read because it reminded me of everything I had lost. She said she recognized that kind of pain because she had buried her fiancé 2 years earlier after a car accident on an icy road outside Cleveland. Since then, she had built walls so high she could barely see the sky. This dinner, she explained, wasn't about romance in the way people imagine. It was about choosing not to be alone in our grief anymore. The food was simple but perfect. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans sautéed in butter. But what filled the room wasn't the aroma of the meal. It was honesty. For the first time, I told someone how it felt to sign divorce papers while my daughter watched cartoons in the next room, unaware her world was splitting in 2. I admitted how ashamed I felt for not fighting harder, for not being stronger. Rachel listened, not with pity, but with understanding that came from surviving her own nights of unbearable silence. Then she spoke about the hospital corridors that reminded her of the one she walked down the night her fiancé never made it out of surgery. She confessed that sometimes she still reached for her phone to text him about her day before remembering he wasn't there. Her voice cracked, and without thinking, I reached across the table and held her hand. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic in the way movies make these moments seem. It was quiet and steady, like 2 broken pieces leaning against each other so they wouldn't fall. In the weeks that followed, that dinner became a turning point neither of us had planned. We started cooking together on Sundays. We began taking evening walks along the Scioto River, talking about things that once felt too heavy to say out loud. I finally opened my daughter's letters and read them to Rachel, tears streaming down my face as she sat beside me. Rachel visited her fiancé's grave for the first time in months, and I went with her, standing back respectfully but present, reminding her she didn't have to face memories alone. Healing didn't happen overnight. There were setbacks. Days when the past came rushing back and knocked us down. But there was something different now. We weren't drowning separately. We were swimming, awkwardly and imperfectly, towards something that looked like hope. One rainy afternoon, months later, I received a call from my ex-wife. She told me my daughter had been asking why I never smiled in our video calls anymore. That question broke something open inside me. That night, I told Rachel I wanted to fight for more time with my child, even if it meant long flights and uncomfortable conversations. She squeezed my hand and said love is never wasted effort. If this story is touching your heart so far, pause for a second and comment the word hope below. Let's fill this space with reminders that none of us are alone in our battles. Eventually, that small apartment in Columbus didn't feel temporary anymore. It felt like a place where two people had chosen courage over isolation. The candles returned often, not as a symbol of romance alone, but as a reminder of the night everything shifted. The night someone dared to say just you and me, not in possession, but in partnership against the darkness. And one evening, as we stood washing dishes side by side, I realized something profound. Love isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's roast chicken on a Wednesday. Sometimes it's sitting across from someone who sees your scars and doesn't flinch. Sometimes it's asking if this is a date and discovering it's actually a lifeline. Before this story ends, I want to ask you something from the heart. If this journey of Rachel and Jonathan moved you, if it reminded you that healing is possible even after the deepest loss, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate resilience and second chances. Your support keeps these stories alive. Because in the end, that dinner for two wasn't about romance at all. It was about choosing connection in a world that often pushes us into solitude. It was about understanding that broken people aren't beyond repair. And sometimes, all it takes to begin again is a candlelit table, a warm meal, and the courage to believe that just you and me might be enough to start over.